The house had never felt this quiet before. Not peaceful. Not calm. Quiet like a courtroom just before a verdict. Table stood alone in the bedroom, the late afternoon sun leaking through the curtains in thin golden lines. The hospital card lay in his palm, light as paper but heavy as a coffin lid. HIV and AIDS treatment card. Patient, Naledi Kumalo. First visit, March 2019. His mind refused to accept it. He read it again. And again. As if the words might rearrange themselves out of pity. They met in 2021. That meant Naledi had walked into his life already knowing. Already carrying the truth. Already planning. A cold shiver slid down his spine. His heart didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly, silently, like ice spreading across a lake at night. This wasn't betrayal. This was what disguised as love. The card slipped from his fingers and floated to the carpet. Table didn't bend to pick it up. He just stared at it, breathing shallowly, his thoughts racing faster than his heart could keep up. Every memory rushed back, but now, each one wore a new face. The whiskey that tasted wrong. The way his body shut down without warning. The nurse's terrified eyes. Naledi's perfect timing. Her tears that never reached her eyes. Table pressed his fist to his mouth to stop himself from making a sound. Because at that exact moment, he heard her voice. "Babe." Naledi called from the kitchen. "Did you find the keys?" Her voice was warm. Casual. Loving. The performance of a lifetime. Table bent down, picked up the card, and slid it into his pocket like a loaded weapon. "Yes," he replied evenly. "I've got them." When Naledi appeared in the doorway moments later, she was smiling, hair tied back, apron on, looking like the picture of a devoted wife. "You okay?" she asked. "You look tired." Table met her eyes. For the first time since he met her, he really looked. And what he saw wasn't love. It was calculation. "I'm fine," he said. "Just a long day." Naledi nodded, satisfied. She kissed his cheek and went back to the kitchen. And in that moment, something inside Table died. But something else was born. Black heart. That night, Table lay beside Naledi, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully, her breathing slow and even. The woman who had destroyed his life slept like a baby beside him. He didn't cry. Tears were for men who were still confused. Table understood everything now. And understanding is dangerous. He replayed every warning his spirit had ever sent him, every hesitation, every uneasy feeling he had ignored because he wanted to believe in goodness. He realized something terrifying. Naledi had never loved him. She had studied him. His discipline. His kindness. His clean lifestyle. He wasn't a husband. He was a solution. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Table made a decision. He would not confront her. He would not accuse her. He would not lose control. Because the most dangerous man in the room is not the loudest one. It's the one who smiles while sharpening the knife. Brain. From that day on, Table became an actor. A better one than Naledi ever was. He laughed at her jokes. Held her hand in public. Prayed with her at night. But behind the scenes, he was gathering truth piece by piece. He checked old messages on her phone while she showered. He reviewed bank statements at work. He tracked dates, locations, patterns. And then he found it. A pharmacy receipt. Recent. Current. Not old medication. Not leftover pills. Active treatment. His stomach twisted. She was still managing her condition, carefully, secretly, while pretending to be a loyal wife standing by her infected husband. Table closed his laptop slowly. "She never planned to tell me," he whispered. And worse. She never planned to stop. Warning. A week later, Naledi noticed something change. Table was calmer. Too calm. He didn't ask questions anymore. Didn't need reassurance. Didn't seek comfort. He watched her. Not obviously. Not suspiciously. But like a man memorizing exits. At night, Naledi would wake suddenly, her heart racing, convinced she felt eyes on her. She'd turn and find Table asleep, facing the other direction. Still. Silent. And fear, the kind she hadn't felt in years, began to grow. Candle. Table scheduled a private appointment in another province under the excuse of a work seminar. He paid cash. Used no shared insurance. Left no trace. The doctor was older. Calm. Experienced. When Table finished telling his story, the room felt heavier. The doctor leaned back and sighed. Mr. Dlamini, he said gently, what you experienced wasn't just unethical. He paused. It was criminal. The word echoed in Table's mind. Criminal. The doctor explained the effects of drugging. The timeline. The transmission risks. The psychological manipulation. Then he said something Naledi never expected. You're healthier than you think, the doctor continued. Your discipline saved your life. Early treatment, controlled viral load, you did everything right. Table felt a strange mix of relief and rage. He survived. But someone else didn't. The nurse. The doctor looked at him carefully. If you ever choose to pursue this legally, he said, documentation and patience will be your greatest weapons. Patience. Table nodded. He had plenty of that now. Drop of blood. Back home, Naledi planned something of her own. She sensed the shift. She felt the tension. She knew something was wrong. And when a liar feels cornered, they don't retreat. They escalate. She began reinforcing the narrative, bringing up the hospital incident casually, mentioning the nurse, reminding Table of how careless medical staff could be. Table listened. Agreed. Nodded. Each word she spoke dug her grave a little deeper. Meanwhile, Mama Nondi began to pray differently. She watched her son closely. A mother always knows when her child has crossed into dangerous territory, not because he's weak, but because he's done being gentle. One evening, she touched his arm and said quietly, "Truth doesn't need noise, my son. It only needs time." Table met her eyes. She knew. Balance scale. Naledi thought she had one. She thought the past was buried. The blame transferred. The truth silenced. But she didn't understand one thing. Table had stopped being the hunted. And season 2 wasn't about pain anymore. It was about exposure. Because secrets don't just come out. They explode. If Naledi thought she was afraid before, she had no idea what fear really felt like. Because fear isn't screaming. Fear isn't running. Fear is sitting across from someone who knows the truth. And still smiles at you. That was the new Table. The calm that terrified her. Naledi noticed it first at dinner. Table was eating quietly, carefully, like a man counting every bite. He nodded when she spoke. He smiled when she laughed. But his eyes no longer followed her the way they used to. They observed. Like a man watching a chessboard, not a lover watching his wife. Is everything okay at work? Naledi asked casually, stirring her food. Everything's fine, Table replied, not looking up. Very fine. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She forced a laugh. You've been saying that a lot lately. Table finally looked at her. And for half a second, just half, Naledi felt naked. Exposed. Then he smiled. Maybe I've just learned to appreciate peace, he said. That night, Naledi didn't sleep. She lay awake replaying every mistake she might have made. Every trace she might have left behind. Every loose end she thought she had tied. Her heart whispered something she refused to accept. He knows. The nurse who never forgot. Across the city, in a small rented room, Tandikeo, the nurse who had lost everything, sat staring at her phone. She hadn't worked in a hospital since that day. No license. No reputation. No second chance. She had moved. Changed clinics. Changed friends. But she hadn't changed her truth. One afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello. There was a pause. Then a calm male voice. My name is Tebo Dlamini. You treated me during an allergic emergency 2 years ago. Silence. Her breath caught. I know this call may surprise you, Tebo continued gently. But I want you to know something. He paused. I believe you. The phone slipped from her fingers. No one had ever said that. They met 2 days later in a quiet cafe far from the city center. Tandikeo's hands shook as she spoke. I used a sealed needle, she said firmly. I remember it clearly. I remember because the woman with you kept staring at me. Watching every move. Tebo nodded. She wanted you blamed. Tears filled Tandikeo's eyes. They destroyed my life, she whispered. Tebo leaned forward. No, he said softly. They borrowed your pain. And now, I'm taking it back. The footage no one knew existed. Hospitals forget people. But cameras don't. Tebo didn't storm the hospital. He didn't threaten lawsuits. He waited. Through a private investigator, he learned something shocking. The hospital had archived CCTV footage from the emergency wing, stored, forgotten, untouched. One late evening, Tebo watched the grainy video alone. There it was. Naledi. Standing too close. Watching too carefully. Her eyes following the tray. And then, the moment. The nurse opened a new sealed needle. Clear. Undeniable. Tebo exhaled slowly. The lie had a crack now. And cracks grow. Now this mistake. Naledi made her fatal mistake on a Sunday afternoon. She went through Tebo's study while he was out jogging. She wasn't looking for proof. She was looking for reassurance. But what she found instead was silence. Clean folders. Empty drawers. No clues. That scared her more than evidence ever could. When Tebo returned, she watched him closely. You've been busy lately, she said. Building something, he replied. What? Tebo smiled. A future where the truth doesn't hide. Her blood ran cold. That night, Naledi called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. A man from her past. A man who knew too much. Things are changing, she whispered into the phone. And I think I need insurance. Mama Nondi speaks. Tebo finally sat with his mother. Not as a son seeking comfort, but as a man seeking clarity. Mama, he said quietly, what do you do when someone poisons you slowly, then pretends to save you? Mama Nondi closed her eyes. You don't rush, she said. You let the poison reveal itself. Tebo nodded. I'm ready. She took his hand. Then don't become what hurt you. There is a moment before a storm breaks. The air becomes heavy. The birds go quiet. And even the wind seems to hold its breath. That was the state of Naledi's mind. Naledi stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection like it belonged to a stranger. Her smile didn't feel natural anymore. It felt rehearsed. Forced. Cracked. Tebo had changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But permanently. He no longer asked where she was going. He no longer questioned her phone calls. He no longer needed reassurance. And that terrified her. Because people who stop asking questions usually already have answers. She splashed water on her face and whispered to herself. Calm down. You've handled worse. But deep inside, her heart knew the truth. She had underestimated him. Tebo lived 2 lives now. At home, he was the same gentle husband, respectful, quiet, attentive. He kissed Naledi on the forehead before bed. He prayed with her. He laughed when expected. But outside that house, he was assembling truth like a weapon. He made the private investigator in parking lots, cafes, places where no one noticed quiet men talking quietly. The footage is authentic, the investigator said one afternoon. Time-stamped. Untouched. Table nodded. And the nurse. She's willing to testify, if you protect her. Table's jaw tightened. I will. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every life Naledi had stepped on to survive her bitterness. Naledi's insurance arrived sooner than expected. His name was Sibusiso. He showed up at her door one evening unannounced, older now, rougher around the edges, but with the same careless eyes. You look nervous, he said, stepping inside without invitation. Naledi crossed her arms. I told you not to come here. You told me you needed help, he replied. And help always comes with a price. She swallowed. I just need you to confirm something if anyone asks, she said. That we were together around 2021. Sibusiso laughed. That's funny, he said. Because the last time I saw you was before that. Naledi froze. You promised, she hissed. I promised nothing, he replied. And you never told me your husband was sick. That word hit her like a slap. Careful, she warned. But Sibusiso smiled. The kind of smile that meant trouble. Table made his move quietly. He invited Naledi, Mama Nondi, and a few close family members to dinner, nothing fancy. Just family time. Naledi felt relief. If he's planning something, she thought, he wouldn't do it like this. She was wrong. During dinner, Mama Nondi casually mentioned something. You know, she said, stirring her tea, I ran into that nurse who treated you years ago. Naledi's fork stopped me there. Table didn't look at her. Oh? Naledi forced a smile. How is she? Mama Nondi sighed. Still struggling. Lost her job. Her license. All because of a mistake she swears she never made. Silence fell like a blanket. Table finally looked up. She didn't make a mistake, he said calmly. Naledi's heartbeat thundered in her ears. What do you mean, she asked, her voice tight. I mean, Table continued, truth has a way of resurfacing. Naledi excused herself to the bathroom and locked the door. Her hands were shaking. That night, Naledi tried to confront Table. You've been distant, she said. If something's wrong, just tell me. Table looked at her gently. Would you tell me if something was wrong, he asked. Yes, she said too quickly. Table nodded slowly. Good, he said. Then when the time comes, I believe you. She felt sick. 2 days later, Tandikeo, the nurse, handed Table something unexpected. A personal journal. I wrote everything down after it happened, she said. Dates. Faces. Conversations. Table flipped through the pages. Naledi's name appeared more than once. The storm clouds finally broke. That same night, Naledi received an email. No sender name. Just one line. I know what you did. Attached was a still image from CCTV footage. Her face. Clear. Watching. Naledi screamed. Across the city, Table closed his laptop calmly. The trap was no longer being built. It was already closed. The following days moved slowly, but each second felt heavy, as if time itself had decided to watch what would happen next. Naledi became jumpy, startled by every notification on her phone, every unfamiliar car passing the gate, every pause in Table's speech. She laughed too loudly, talked too much, and tried too hard to prove nothing was wrong. But guilt has a smell, and it was beginning to leak into everything she touched. Table noticed it all. He noticed how she checked his phone when she thought he wasn't looking, how she hovered near his laptop, how her questions were no longer curious but desperate. And through it all, he remained calm, frighteningly calm, like a man who had already finished grieving and moved on to something colder. One evening, Naledi finally snapped. She accused him of hiding things, of pulling away, of judging her silently. Her voice trembled as she spoke, not with innocence but with fear. Tebo listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, he simply asked one question, softly, almost kindly, "Naledi, if I asked you to tell me the whole truth about everything before we met, could you?" The room seemed to tilt. Naledi opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a smile and said, "Of course." But her eyes betrayed her, darting away like a child caught with stolen goods. Tebo nodded, as if satisfied, though inside he knew the truth was already choking her. Behind the scenes, the machinery of consequence was turning. The nurse, Tandikeo, had agreed to formally submit her journal. The CCTV footage was verified by an independent technician. Medical experts quietly reviewed timelines that no longer aligned with Naledi's version of events. Piece by piece, the story Naledi had carefully constructed for years began to collapse under its own weight. What made it worse for her was that she didn't know when it would fall. She only knew that it would. And anticipation can be more painful than punishment. Naledi tried to regain control the only way she knew how, by performing love. She became affectionate again, cooking Tebo's favorite meals, posting happy photos online, reminding the world that they were the perfect couple who had survived hardship together. But each smile she posted felt like a lie screaming to be exposed. Meanwhile, Tebo watched quietly as the comments poured in, praising Naledi's devotion, calling her a strong woman. Each compliment felt like salt on a wound, but he endured it. Because he understood something important now: the higher the lie is lifted, the harder it falls. The turning point came on a quiet afternoon when Tebo invited Naledi to sit with him in the living room. His tone was gentle, almost nostalgic. He spoke about the early days, how he had trusted easily, how he believed love was always honest. Naledi relaxed slightly, thinking this was another emotional moment she could steer. But then Tebo said something that made her blood freeze. "I spoke to the nurse," he said. "Just that. Nothing more." Naledi laughed nervously, dismissing it as irrelevant, but her hands trembled uncontrollably. Tebo continued, still calm, still soft. "She remembered everything," he added. Naledi stood up suddenly, claiming she felt dizzy, but the truth was simpler: her walls were closing in. That night, Naledi didn't sleep at home. She claimed she was visiting a friend, but instead she sat alone in her car, gripping the steering wheel, her mind racing through escape routes that no longer existed. She realized then that the most dangerous thing she had ever done wasn't what she did to Tebo. It was believing she could outsmart truth forever. Across town, Tebo sat alone, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of what was coming: not just justice, but exposure, public scrutiny, and the pain of reopening wounds. Yet even with all that, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Because for the first time since his life had changed, he wasn't confused anymore. And somewhere between Naledi's fear and Tebo's resolve, the story shifted. This was no longer about a man who had been wrong. It was about a woman who had built her life on deception, and a truth that was no longer willing to stay buried. The next step would not be private. It would not be quiet. And when it finally came, there would be no place left to hide. The day the truth stepped into the light did not begin with shouting or chaos. It began quietly, almost politely, the way disasters often do. Tebo received a call early that morning confirming that the hospital review board meeting, originally meant to be internal, had been opened to legal observers due to new evidence. Naledi was still asleep when he ended the call. He watched her for a long moment, the woman who had shared his bed, his home, his name, and nearly destroyed his life, and he felt no anger anymore. Only clarity. Naledi accompanied him to the hospital willingly, dressed elegantly, confident in the story she had rehearsed for years. She believed this was just another meeting where she would cry at the right moment and say the right words. In the waiting area, she held Tebo's hand tightly, squeezing it as if to remind him who she was supposed to be. Tebo allowed it. Around them sat hospital administrators, legal representatives, and a few unfamiliar faces, journalists, quietly taking notes. Naledi noticed them too late. Her smile stiffened. The meeting began formally. Apologies were offered. Protocols were discussed. Then the tone shifted. A legal officer cleared his throat and announced that new material had surfaced, requiring a full review of the original incident. Naledi felt her stomach drop. Table released her hand. Slowly. The screen at the front of the room came to life. CCTV footage. Grainy, but clear enough. The emergency room. The tray. The sealed needle being opened. And then Naledi, standing far closer than necessary, her eyes fixed, her body tense, watching every movement like a hawk. Murmurs filled the room. Naledi shook her head repeatedly, whispering, "This doesn't prove anything," but her voice sounded small even to her own ears. Then the nurse, Tandikeo, was called in. She walked forward with quiet dignity, no anger on her face, only exhaustion and truth. She spoke calmly, explaining the procedure, the protocol, and the moment her life changed forever. She held up her journal, dates and notes matching the footage precisely. The room went silent. Then came the medical expert. Then the timeline. Then the words that cracked Naledi's world wide open. Mr. Dlamini could not have contracted the virus during this hospital visit. Naledi stood up abruptly. "This is a lie," she shouted, her voice breaking. "You're all lying." All eyes turned to her. And then Table stood. His voice did not shake. That frightened her more than shouting ever could. "My wife has been receiving treatment since 2019, he said, calmly. 2 years before we met. A gasp rippled through the room. Naledi screamed his name, denying it, begging him to stop, but it was too late. The hospital card was passed forward. Verified. Confirmed. The journalist's pens moved faster. The administrators exchanged looks of panic, not because of Table anymore, but because of Naledi. The story had flipped. The victim had a voice. And the liar had nowhere to hide. Naledi collapsed into her chair, her designer confidence dissolving into raw panic. Her carefully constructed image shattered in real time. The woman once praised for loyalty was now being looked at with disbelief, then suspicion, then something colder. Judgment. Outside, cameras waited. And as Naledi was escorted past them, head down, eyes wild, the truth followed her, loud, permanent, impossible to outrun. Across the room, Table sat back down slowly. His hands trembled just once before becoming still. Justice didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. But it felt right. And for the first time since his life had changed, the world finally knew what he had survived. Naledi's fall did not happen all at once. It happened in waves, each one stripping away another layer of the life she had so carefully constructed. By the time the hospital meeting ended, the story had already escaped the walls of that room. Within hours, headlines began to circulate, carefully worded but unmistakable. Husband cleared as investigation reveals new evidence. Hospital error claim under review. Naledi sat alone in the back seat of a hired car, staring at her phone as notification after notification lit up the screen. Friends who once called daily were suddenly silent. Group chats went quiet. Invitations vanished. Her name, once associated with grace and sympathy, was now tied to controversy and deception. At first, Naledi tried to control the narrative. She released a short statement through a lawyer, claiming emotional distress, misunderstanding, and privacy invasion. But the public had already made up its mind. Online discussions exploded, not with cruelty, but with disappointment. People felt betrayed. Women who once praised her strength now questioned her honesty. Health advocates spoke carefully but firmly about responsibility, truth, and trust. The sympathy she had lived on for years evaporated overnight, replaced by a cold demand for accountability. Inside her home, silence became unbearable. The house that once echoed with rehearsed laughter now felt hollow and accusing. Naledi avoided mirrors because the woman staring back looked unfamiliar, older, exposed, afraid. She replayed every moment in her mind, searching for a point where she could have stopped, confessed, chosen differently. But pride had carried her too far. Fear had sealed her mouth. And now the truth had spoken for her. The real blow came when brands quietly cut ties. One by one, contracts were paused, then cancelled. The charity board she sat on released a polite but devastating announcement distancing themselves from the situation. Even her social media following began to shrink. Not with insults or attacks, but with unfollows. That hurt the most. Being ignored felt worse than being hated. Naledi tried calling Table. Once. Twice. 10 times. He never answered. One evening, as rain hammered against the windows, Naledi finally broke. She sank to the floor of the living room, surrounded by the expensive furniture that no longer impressed anyone. For the first time in years, she cried without an audience. No cameras. No sympathy. Just raw regret. She whispered apologies into the empty air, but apologies spoken too late have no wings. Meanwhile, outside her world, consequences continued to unfold. Legal proceedings moved forward quietly but firmly. Her name was removed from panels and events. She became a cautionary tale, not whispered in gossip, but discussed in serious conversations about trust, disclosure, and the damage silence can cause. Naledi Kumalo, once admired, was now remembered for a different reason. Yet even in downfall, there was no celebration. No victory music. Only lessons. Naledi would spend years rebuilding, not her reputation, but her humanity. Whether the world would ever forgive her was uncertain. What was certain was this: lies may protect you temporarily, but the truth waits patiently. And when it arrives, it takes everything it is owed. As for Table, he moved forward, scarred, wiser, and finally free. And Naledi was left behind, standing in the wreckage of her own choices, learning the hardest truth of all. Some mistakes don't destroy you loudly. They destroy you slowly, publicly, and forever. Years passed, not with noise, but with silence. The kind of silence that settles into your bones and never quite leaves. Naledi now lived far from the city that once knew her name. No cameras followed her. No strangers whispered when she walked past. She had chosen a small coastal town where the sea spoke louder than memory, and where nobody cared about who she used to be. In that quiet place, Naledi learned the art of living with herself. Every morning, she woke before sunrise. Not because she had somewhere to be, but because sleep no longer came easily. The past had a way of knocking when the world was quiet. She would sit on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands, those same hands that had once held another man's fate so carelessly. Time had aged them. Fine lines traced her skin, each one a reminder that consequences, unlike scandals, do not fade quickly. Naledi often thought about the woman she used to be, and not with hatred, but with sorrow. She saw now how fear had shaped her choices. Fear of rejection. Fear of being alone. Fear of telling the truth and losing everything. In trying to protect herself, she had destroyed the very things she was afraid to lose. Love. Respect. Dignity. The irony no longer made her angry. It simply made her tired. There were moments when she almost reached for her phone to search Table's name. Almost. But she never did. Some doors, once closed by truth, are not meant to be reopened by regret. She had accepted that her apology, no matter how sincere, might never be heard, and that this, too, was part of accountability. Forgiveness is not something you demand. It is something you live without. On quiet afternoons, Naledi volunteered at a local community center, not as a speaker, not as a face, but as a helper. She served tea. She cleaned. She listened. And in listening to others' pain, she learned something unexpected. Everyone carries secrets, but not everyone chooses honesty when it matters. She began to understand that her story was not unique, only her silence had been. Sometimes, late at night, Naledi would stand by the ocean and let the wind hit her face. She spoke to no one, but she confessed to everything. Not for sympathy. Not for redemption. But because truth, once ignored, demands to be spoken even if only to the waves. She no longer tried to rewrite her story. She let it remain what it was, a warning, a lesson, a scar. Naledi had stopped asking to be seen as a victim or a villain. She accepted being human, flawed, afraid, and responsible. And in that acceptance, something softened inside her. She did not get a happy ending. She got something quieter. Something harder. Something real. She got understanding. And sometimes, that is the only redemption life offers. This story is a warning written in human lives. It reminds us that nothing hidden escapes the eyes of God. You can fool people. You can rewrite events. You can even convince yourself that your actions were justified. But the truth does not sleep forever. It waits. And when its time comes, it rises with a power no lie can withstand. Evil is rarely loud in the beginning. It whispers. It convinces. It dresses itself as love, as protection, as sacrifice. But anything built on deception will eventually collapse, no matter how beautiful it looks from the outside. This story teaches us that sickness does not make someone weak, but betrayal does. And love is not proven by staying, it is proven by honesty. Real love gives choice. Real love gives truth. Anything else is control. To those watching, guard your heart, but also guard your conscience. Because the most dangerous prison is not made of iron bars, it is made of secrets you are afraid to confess. And remember this. God may be silent, but He is never blind. Truth may be delayed, but it is never denied. What you plant in darkness will one day grow in the light. Choose righteousness when no one is watching. Choose truth even when it costs you everything. Because peace comes not from hiding your past, but from facing it. Thank you for watching Untold African Stories. If this story moved you, challenged you, or opened your eyes, please like, share, and subscribe so these lessons can reach more hearts. Until next time, stay awake, stay truthful, and remember. Every story has a lesson, and every lesson has a price. Untold African Stories, signing off.